O'clock, so I'm going to open our meeting. Just remind everyone that we are recording and streaming this meeting via video and audio live. It's on the City of Hobart's YouTube channel. So if there's an elected member present who hasn't yet signed into the meeting in accordance with our COVID safe plan, please do so now. And I request that all mobile devices be switched off or put to silent. And a reminder that for the purposes of recording, just wait for myself to announce you before you start speaking. We have all elected members present bar Councillor Ewan, who is on a leave of absence. And I will start our meeting with acknowledgement to country. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built. I acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and Indigenous rights. Now, the minutes of our last meeting have been received, and Deputy Lord Mayor is moving those.
Yes.
That they're accepted. Seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. That's passed unanimously. Transfer of agenda items. Are there any items that anyone would like to transfer as part of the agenda to any other part of the agenda? No. Communication from the Chair. I don't have any tonight. And there's been no council workshops. Public question time will come later tonight as part of our AGM, so there's no other questions on notice, I don't think. Petitions, I've just been informed by the General Manager that we do have a petition, so the General Manager will read that out.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have a petition signed by 20 petitioners, Lord Mayor. It reads, Dunurn Road was resealed in February 2020. The result was unsatisfactory. Bituminous binder bled through the surface, creating a nuisance for vehicles as well as pedestrians. It also got into adjacent properties and worked its way into houses, damaging floors. After 11 months, the council carried out remedial work which has not proven successful. The bituminous binder is still evident, particularly during warm weather, and there are thousands of pieces of bluestone still loose on the surface. There appears to be no recourse other than to send this petition to the council. We, the undersigned residents, request the council to undertake immediate remedial work, Lord Mayor, on the said road to make it satisfactory again.
I move that be sent to the relevant committee, Infrastructure Services Committee, for consideration.
Thank you. Seconded by Alderman Zuko. All those in favour of that, receiving and passing that on, say aye. Yes, say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 7 is consideration of supplementary items, and there are none. Item 8 on our agenda is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Would any members like to indicate an interest in any item appearing on the open agenda? There being none, we will now move on to the City Planning Committee. And I'll note now that Council is acting as a planning authority, and I'll invite the Deputy Lord Mayor to open item 9.1, which is 35 Melville Street, Hobart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move the item as it is on the books.
Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, this item is for partial demolition, alterations, extension, signage and change of use to hotel industry. There were at 35 Melville Street, so it's an old arts and craft house in the central business area. There were 24 representations, most of who representors were mostly neighbouring residents in social housing behind the application site, and their concern was around impact on residential amenity. Now, this is a difficult one because the central business area it's a commercial zone, and residential amenity takes a back seat, unfortunately, in the planning scheme. So the performance criteria that we're looking at tonight are use, potentially contaminated land code, parking and access code, historic heritage code, and science code for heritage. So it is in a commercial zone, the land is potentially contaminated, the number of parking spaces need to be considered, so too the heritage code as a heritage place and the science code. The proposal is looking at a change of use for an existing building to a hotel industry lounge bar style venue with outdoor garden bar area proposed to open between 10 and 12 p.m. was the application, but for the garden bar and lounge also for those kind of hours. But as you can see in the PLN 6 condition, we have the garden bar open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m, so to accommodate some of the residents' concerns for both Monday through to Sunday. The lounge area would be open from 5 o'clock till 12 p.m, licence for that, but that's internal. Lord Mayor, this was a discussion and we had deputations at committee. Residents were expressing their concerns of impact for people who may have social issues and concerns about getting enough sleep, not having too much noise. The beer garden, or the beer garden, is likely to have capacity for about 100 patrons, which is 100 people in a fairly small room can make quite a lot of noise. So we did have some conditions which were conditions and advice to help ameliorate some of those concerns from the neighbouring residents, and some of the information that we provided was sent through again in an improved form, but I think it's up to elected members to consider what we have before us and whether it's enough to make a decision one way or another. I think there's certainly some concerns still raised for me, even with these conditions, that don't satisfy as well as it should some of those things that could impact on neighbours. So I'll leave it there and listen to further debate, Lord Mayor.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Lord Mayor, I just have two questions. The first one is, it appears that the drawings which were submitted a few days ago is rather inadequate and maybe confusing. Is there a recent drawing, and can there be some clarification on this particular matter? That's the first question.
Yes, Ms Abbey, would you be able to respond?
Through you, Chair. Late last week, the applicant did provide an additional drawing, which was circulated to some extent. On further consideration of that drawing, that raised, frankly, more questions than it answered, and I spoke to the applicant and suggested that they obtain further drawings which would demonstrate their proposals. Those drawings were provided this morning and circulated to the residents on this morning.
Another question,
And
Councillor
the
Dutta.
second question, Lord Mayor, is in the report there is a statement, and I don't remember the page unfortunately, but I'm sure the officers would be able to relate to this. Why would you say that the landscaping plan is somewhat deceptive, and in which way is it deceptive?
Ms Abbey.
Through you, Chair. There was some concern over the landscaping plans, and there is a proposed condition which relates to landscaping. So if a permit is granted tonight by the council, then further plans will be submitted and approved, particularly by the heritage team.
Any further discussion or questions? Actually, while we're on questions, I might ask a couple if I can. The advice about landscape screening, why isn't that able to be a condition?
There are two reasons for that, Lord Mayor. The proposal as it stands has a row of parks adjacent to the back fence, and then there's space for a turning circle. The applicant has indicated that they would like to put in the landscaping along the back fence, which has been requested by the adjacent landowners, but they're not confident at this stage that they'll be able to do so. They need to consult with their engineers to make sure that they would have the space for the turning space for vehicles to be able to put in the landscaping.
But is that a reason for it to not be a condition, or is that something that the proponent will have to think about? Like, it doesn't really, does it affect?
Well, Lord Mayor, we need to be careful with conditions that we don't end up compromising what we are purporting to approve, a proposal with a certain amount of parking and car space movements. If we impose a condition for landscaping, then they may not actually be able to carry out what we've approved that they can do.
The other question was just in relation to the operating hours and some of the conditions around amplified music in the courtyard. I'm just drawing on the example of 45 Hampden Road in Battery Point, which was a garden venue that was close to one resident, but the council at that stage included conditions about external lighting, apart from security lighting, having to be off between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m, and also that music recordings not be played between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. in the courtyard. It could be inside, of course. Is there a reason we couldn't include that sort of condition?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. The particular property you're referring to was in a different zone. From memory, that was a mixed-use zone, which has an expectation that there will be some residential use within the zone, and so there is generally a higher level of protection for residential amenity, and that gives us a basis to impose conditions such as you're suggesting. The contrast here is that the proposal is in a commercial zone. There's very clear statements in the scheme about distances from residential properties. For example, this is over 150 metres from the closest residential zoned land, and so the high level of protection for amenity doesn't exist for this particular site.
Okay. But it doesn't. Does it rule out that if the council, using its own discretion, wanted to include something about amplified music, does there somewhere say the zone does not allow you to make exceptions where there are residential properties close to bars?
Well, there's a clear statement in the scheme that certain activities can be carried out within certain hours. That's a right. Essentially, there's still an application that's necessary, but where the scheme has such strong indications that sort of behaviour is appropriate, then it's difficult to justify a legal basis for a condition. A condition has to tick certain boxes, and if it doesn't relate to some of the concerns effectively raised by the scheme, then those conditions have no proper basis.
And just finally, I note that a bar just about 7 blocks from this one, the Boodle and Beasley Bar, is only allowed to use its garden area between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m, Monday to Sunday. Now, it's got 1 or 2 neighbours, not sort of 25. Can you explain to representatives why they can't be considered in the same sort of light?
Again, it boils down to the zoning of the land. That lot is a little bit unique in the sense that the back half of the lot where part of the garden bar was proposed is actually itself zoned in a residential, and so those much harsher restrictions regarding residential amenity apply to that lot.
Lord Mayor?
Discussion?
Yep. Could I just clarify, a point, please. Could I just get clarification if the wall surrounding the beer garden is solid?
Ms Abbey?
Through you, Chair. That is the intention based on the plans which were circulated this morning. I have drafted a proposed amendment to the permit to include a condition which specifically requires that it be solid, that would be checked again when an application was made for building. We would check that against the planning permit to make sure that what's actually being proposed to be built matches what has planning approval.
Okay. And the second part of that is, I understand that the wall around the beer garden will be 1.6 metres high, sitting on a 0.5 metre block wall and a sunken beer garden. So we've got the floor of the beer garden, a 0.5 metre block wall, and then a 1.6 metre solid fence around it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, Councillor Dutta?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The other issue, Chair, for me is parking. Now, while we have been focusing on other matters, the question here for me is, whether the proposed application satisfies the provision of E661. Now, under the acceptable solution, it is very clear from the report that it does not satisfy or meet that particular provisions of the clause. And the facts are very clear. There is a provision for 74 spaces are required, and the provision made is only 7, and there is a lack or deficit of about 67. So those are the facts given to us, and therefore it does not satisfy that particular provision. We then look at clause 6.6.1 P1, and it states very clearly that the number of spaces or car park spaces, providing spaces, must be sufficient to meet the reasonable needs of users, having regard to all of the following. A states the car parking demand. Now, for me, in the last few weeks or months, we have been focusing on this particular issue quite passionately, that there is a great problem with regards to parking. This was highlighted in the media. We have anecdotal evidence to suggest that we have parking problem in the city. We have experiential evidence that supports this. And one can go further and say that there are also some research evidence that this would support. Now, what is interesting here is this, that on page 34, 6.9.5 of the Planning Committee meeting of the 15th of February, and I quote, it says, during the weekends, local residents and employees from the surrounding businesses are expected to be the main customers. They are thought to walk to and from the venue. Now, the two words for me are very interesting. The two words are that it's expected. Now, this is an anticipation, as it were. It's a hope. There's no real evidence to say this is the case. That is one argument that is being proposed. And on the other hand, it then goes on under that deduction that is based on that premise to say that the thinking or the belief behind this is based on the presumption that people around the area will go there. Now, I would, on the contrary, suggest that that may not be the case because we don't have the evidence to support that particular premise. And therefore, I have difficulty supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? No further discussion? I might just...
I will have a quick word, Lord Mayor.
Sure.
I was also struggling to support this based around the landscaping in the backyard and the beer garden and how insulated that would be to contain noise. Because I do have some sympathies for the neighbours and I don't want them to have their amenity impacted by this, but I do understand that there's a right to have this facility there. So having considered it, I will be supporting it tonight because I have spoken in depth about the insulation or the solid wall nature of the beer garden. So that does give me some comfort. And I understand that that will hopefully resolve the issues for the neighbours with regard to noise. I would like to think that the landscaping plan, which is to the director's discretion or director's approval, will also help improve the situation. So I'm hoping that landscaping is thoroughly done and that the noise reduction from the solid walls helps the neighbours. So I will support it tonight.
Councillor Harvey, look, I think it's a terrific project in many aspects. Really lovely designs, great use of what is a really lovely building, and certainly supportive of open area garden, beer garden style venues in the city, because we don't have many of them. But I'm not, unless there could be conditions to actually restrict amplified music in the courtyard earlier than basically 10 p.m. 7 nights a week, I can't support this, because I just think it will just be something that comes back and we'll have lots of complaints, and it'll just be an ongoing running sore for the neighbours. It's a shame that the proponents couldn't perhaps have voluntarily made some of those commitments. So it's really just the, if the amplified music could be limited after a certain time, at least some nights of the week, early in the working week, and if those operating hours could be just a little bit shortened, again a couple of nights in the working week rather than 10 p.m. 7 nights a week, with so many neighbours close by that are obviously concerned about this. I just feel I can't support this, not because I don't support the actual project, but it's really the conditions and the limits on the conditions we're able to place in it that is playing on my mind. Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I think you've raised some really important points because we did have, from the discussion that I had on Monday of last week, just going to that point with the applicant, at that point they were willing to have a chat with neighbours and to try and work things out. They realised how important it is to have good neighbourly relationships, but whilst there has been a bit of a change in the length of time that the beer garden is open, there's still 100 people in there and it's still going to 10 o'clock with neighbours with various social and other needs. And I've been concerned about the inadequacy of the details of information on which to make a decision. We know that making a decision is so much easier when you have all the information at hand, and I think that's been, I think there's been a paucity of that. The point was made by Ms Aby that the nearest residence to this is 150 metres from the application. That says nothing to the 50 residents. Doesn't provide any succour or support for the residents or comfort for the residents who are next door. So there are many things which concern me in relation to this. So certainly, if there had been a foreshadowed motion, I would be supporting that, but I certainly can't support this in its current form, and wish that the applicant had made just that little extra time and had that chance to talk more with the neighbours.
Okay, I'll put that motion for approval. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. No. Show of hands. All those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against?
Councillor Dutta, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Carried, Lord Mayor, 8 votes to 3.
Okay, now we're moving on to item 9.2, which is 14 Goulburn Street.
If I can ask Councillor Harvey to move this, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Harvey,
Move the item, Lord Mayor, for approval.
seconded by Alderman Thomas. Is anyone going to outline the project? Just for the purposes of the community who might be listening.
Lord Mayor, the issue with this item was that the parking, which has been established in the front yard for quite a while, is non-compliant. It doesn't meet the mandatory or the requirements for width and the requirements for length. However, cars have been parking there for quite a while. It matches, it's a mirror image of the neighbour's property. The establishment there has been renovated. All the other issues with this DA are compliant except for the parking. That's the big issue. So big cars potentially will be an issue. Smaller cars will fit within the property. It's conditioned that cars will need to fit within the property, as I understand. So therefore, if cars are parked over the crossover, then they may receive a ticket. But as I understand, it's conditioned that cars will need to park within the boundaries. There's room on one side for an average size vehicle, whereas on the other side it's probably a bit tighter. But looking at the photos that have been provided in the report, it does demonstrate that cars are able to fit within the spaces. So I thought that it was a reasonable compromise or a reasonable thing to vote against the officer's recommendation for refusal, because the spaces are already used for that purpose. So even though they were non-compliant from the start, they're slightly more non-compliant now due to the width factor. But that said, cars have been parking there for a long time, and it does match with the mirror image property next door.
Any further discussion? Councillor Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, I won't be supporting this, and I'll foreshadow the original officer's recommendation for refusal, and just make a note, a point on which is on the agenda of the special committee meeting we've just come from. That it is worth noting that the current application does not include the footpath as the land which forms part of the application, the 14 Goulburn Street and adjacent road reservation, and it doesn't have general manager consent. So it would have been required, and the Roads Division would have had the opportunity to make a recommendation to the GM in relation to this as to whether consent or not should be. Look, this might seem a minor issue, and maybe it is a minor issue. There have been cars parked there for many years, but we're talking about what we can approve as a planning authority, and I think this falls out of that in relation to the parking and the inadequacy and probably the fact that it's crossing the footpath. There's a safety issue as well there. So I'm not going to support this, and I'll foreshadow the officer's recommendation.
Alderman Briscoe.
Lord Mayor, yes, I thought we agreed to have an advice clause saying, just to remind the applicant, it is?
There at the end of the first page.
Oh, is that right? It's in the first page, right. I was looking at the end, right. So if we disallow this, no cars will be able to park there, and added to the parking problems that Hobart has, and or even Councillor Dutterer confirmed that even in his perception we have a parking problem. So if we exclude this from parking, we're adding to the parking problems of Hobart. It's been a lot, well, it could be 40 or 50 years they've had these parking spots. It is a very common way of parking in this area, and around in Mole Street there's about 8 car spots with the same dimensions. So I think we're being very precious if we refuse this tonight, knowing that the fact that the large cars will be infringing onto the footpath and will be fined, I imagine, or infringement notice issued if it's too large a car and it goes over the footpath. So let's not add to the parking problem in Hobart.
Okay, if there's no further, Councillor Dutton.
I just have a question, Lord Mayor, and the question is in regards to safety. Can it be explained to us clearly, if there is a safety issue and if you go ahead with this, will there be any legal liability?
Mr. Noy or Ms. Abbey?
Yeah, through you, Lord Mayor. Look, it would depend on the circumstances. So I'd be reticent to, as a humble planner, provide any legal advice to that question.
Okay, Councillor Dutton.
Thank you. I have difficulty with this as well. It's not because there is a psychological perception of parking. That is not the issue. The issue here is to do with the provisions of the scheme, and it does not satisfy it. And it is on that basis that I'm making the decision. And many a times we are told here in this particular chamber that we have expert advice. None of us are qualified, and yet we go against the decision. And I'm quite happy with that because I do the same. But for me, I make the stand here that I do not support this because I'm quite convinced that it does not meet the provisions of the code. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, any summing up required? No. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no.
No.
A show of hands, all those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Dutta and the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Carried, Lord Mayor, 9 votes to 2.
Moving on now to item 10.
Move
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'd move that we note the building and planning statistics from the 1st of January to the 31st of January 2021.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
And Lord Mayor, you'll see that this is a comparison of month to month. It's you'll see that the January 2021 to 20. So during the period 1st of January 2020 to the 31st of January 2021. No, that's not right. There were 36 building permits issued to the value of $9.7 million, and there were 2 major projects in that period. In the 12 months ending January 2021, there were 646 building permits, and that compares to 612 in January 2020. So the building permits are still cranking through, but obviously there's a reduction in the value overall. So interesting statistics, Lord Mayor, in a very interesting year.
Okay, further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 11 is a motion from Alderman Barakis and others. But Alderman Barakis, you're going to move it.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move the motion.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Okay. Lord Mayor, Hobart's parking capacity has been an increasingly difficult issue for commuters driving into the CBD. This worsening issue has resulted in disputes between residents and commuters, almost resulting in violence over commuters parking in residential areas for the day while at work. It does need to be acknowledged that we do continue to work with the state government to improve our city's public transport services and work to expedite the policies to achieve that which are included in the Hobart City Deal. It is estimated that between 7 and 10% decrease in car volume during peak hour would reduce congestion to levels of about school holidays. However, it does also need to be acknowledged that improved public transport and increased road and parking capacity are not mutually exclusive. They are both desirable, and a mixture of both is necessary to ensure adequate transport options and mobility for commuters into the future. Approximately 70% of commuters use their cars to get around. It is incumbent on councils to deliver on the need of all residents, ratepayers and businesses in the city. That involves identifying areas for increased parking capacity as well as locations for park and ride services on the fringe of the CBD that can alleviate the overflow of cars into residential areas. If the goal of council is to increase the number of commuters utilising public transport, then it should be done in a positive manner. Council should improve our public transport infrastructure so that using public transport is a convenient option. Worsening the experience for those that choose to or need to travel by car in an attempt to force them onto using alternative means of travel is only detrimental to the majority of residents and ratepayers and will ultimately lead to people choosing to shop or work elsewhere, driving businesses and employment out of our city. Council should be aiming to increase commuters' travel options, not reduce them, given we are ultimately here to serve them and their needs. Lord Mayor, I'd also reinforce once again that this isn't a mutually exclusive issue as when we talk about transport issues of Hobart, of the city. There is always a bit of debate about, do we want to be pro-car or anti-car? Are we pro-public transport or anti-public transport? And I think that's a bit of a false dichotomy. We do need better public transport, and I think everybody in the room would agree with that. But the idea that looking at increasing or improving our public transport services or increasing our parking and road network capacity are mutually exclusive, I think, is where the false dichotomy sort of comes in, because we are a growing city, and what our public transport solution has to be a mixture of both of those two. There are people that are always going to or always going to need to use their cars, and ultimately I think it's a fool's errand for us in the council to be dictating to people or telling people what's good for them. I think we need to be responding to what they want or what they need, and I think listening to the community, it's pretty clear what the majority of people want. I will note that I did in fact see Councillor Sherlock's concise statement on Facebook suggesting that this motion might be a waste of time, and there was a bit of note to the General Manager's report on this item, and I thought that might be the best place to start in responding to this, because these might be some concerns or some issues that might pop up in debate. Look, I think part 1 and 2, they don't immediately achieve anything, but I think it is important to note the work that has been done, to acknowledge that, and also to note, and I think the council does need to make it clear what its position is on transport in the city. And I think there are people that do have whether it's a fair or a false preconception about what the council's attitude towards different modes of transport is. And I think we do need to acknowledge explicitly that we believe that there is a mixed model and a mixed solution as far as addressing congestion, and specifically addressing parking. So look, I think those two items, whilst they don't achieve anything fundamentally straight away, I think it is important for the council to note that. As well as part 3 and part 4. Look, we do need to, and I think there was a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about park and rides, and we do, I think most people support the concept of that. I think everyone here supports the concept of that. And there is talks about doing that in surrounding municipalities, but I think we also need to be looking at what the council can do as far as looking into park and ride facilities. I think there are people that either live further out within this municipality, or would drive into, say North Hobart or Newtown or somewhere like that on the fringes of the city, park their car there.
30 seconds.
Lord Mayor, can I request an additional minute?
Seconded by moved by Alderman Thomas, seconded by Alderman Briscoe. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. 1 minute.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I think we do need to be looking at identifying these places. I know there was some acknowledgement the work on that is already underway, but I think it has been a long time, I think, since we've discussed this, and there hasn't been much in the way of tangible of feedback as to how that's progressing. So I think, this is something that needs to be looked into as a matter of some urgency. I think you look at what's happening in the media, in news reports suggesting that this is an issue that's overflowing and blowing into people parking in residential areas, filling up those streets and causing disputes with residents. So I think it's something that we do need to be looking at seriously. As to the part 4, the early bird issue, look, I think it's something that we can look at. I'd actually request that we vote on that item separately, given that there's the issue of needing an absolute majority on that item. But I think there is 2 different kinds of parking that we need. We need short-term parking for people that are coming to shop to utilise the services of our city. But there are also the cohort of people that are coming to work for 8 hours a day, coming to work in those shops that are servicing people, and I think we do need to also provide for those. They have different demands, and they have. Thank you, Lord Mayor. They have different demands. They're not needing half an hour parking or an hour parking. They're needing 4, 5, 6 hours, and I think we do need to provide something in the way of helping people have solutions to that, and we do need to discuss those things. So look, I'm sure there'll be more debate, but I'll leave it there because I think my time's about up.
Thank you, Ruckus. Alderman Thomas.
Yes, look, I won't need extra time, Lord Mayor. The only thing I wanted to say is that I think it's integral that we have this type of motion come forward or be brought to our notice quite often, because this transport issue, so much has been done by officers, so much has been done. To bring it back as an information memorandum, if nothing else, because a lot has been done. I just want to draw on the public transport. Public transport in the city varies at around about 3 or 4% of total travel. There's two things that will encourage. We don't, since the forebears of Mr Heath gave away or sold our public buses off, we don't connect close enough to Metro. We simply don't have a connection to Metro in a solid sense. And there's two ways in which we can make public transport be more viable. One is to have shelters at every bus stop. People will not go down 2 bus stops in this city unless it's dry and you're protected. Number 2, real-time indicators. We must be one of the last cities in the world that doesn't have real-time indicators at principal bus interchanges or at most stops. It's not difficult, ladies and gentlemen, this day and age, to have real-time indicators operating. If you have real-time indicators and you make it comfortable and the buses are kept to an efficient schedule, people will flock to public transport. But we can't allow Metro to sit there without a more significant input from us. So whether or not we, and I acknowledge the Deputy Lord Mayor's years on the Access Advisory Committee and the work that she's done developing that for people with disadvantages that need special services for transport. But this company, this council can do a lot more to relate to Metro. Now, whether or not it doesn't have to be in the form of this motion, but we should be exploring a constant meet-up that looks at Metro in terms of its short and medium-term priorities. And you put in, whether it's sponsored or not, you put in the shelters and you put in real-time indicators, and the 3 or 4% will rise quite quickly. And that by itself, Alderman Baracus and the other people who bought this fine motion would make a huge difference.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It is a continuing theme of mine recently, is that there are two Hobarts, Greater Hobart and the very privileged people who live in Hobart, who can walk or cycle into the town. And I think we've got to do all our have efforts to make sure that there are not 2 Tasmanians, the privileged millionaire people who live in Hobart in their lovely houses, who can walk and have green spaces and have coffee on the way to work and listen to the birds and the bees and so on. Most people who work in Hobart, even according to the Hobart City Council statistics, live outside Hobart. They travel from Dodgers Ferry, Sorell, Kingston, and so on, New Norfolk. And often some of them are very low paid workers. So if we say, yes, you come into our city to work, to make Hobart prosperous, but we're going to make it very hard for you to park. We know the public transport to the outlying suburbs of Greater Hobart is pathetic. It is dreadful, pathetic. So in the meantime, until we have better services, we have to respond to the workers that work in our city. In talking to Alderman Baracus when he suggested this motion, I said, well, we've got a big, huge quarry which essentially is a dumping ground for things that the council doesn't use for a while, or they might use every couple of years, and that's the old Domain quarry. A perfect example that we could clear that out of all the council stuff, remove it to Giblin Street Quarry, and make that as a park and ride. So people could come from the northern suburbs, nick into there, park all day, minimal cost, maybe $2 or something, and walk into the town. And then they can enjoy the lifestyle that us millionaire residents of Hobart can enjoy. But there is one asset of the city, and that's why I suggest, I wonder if Alderman Baracus could include it in, that number 3 should be as a matter of urgency. To identify, rather than always say Kingston's got to do it or Clarence has got to do it, let's us do it. I think we've got to send a message to the people out there in Greater Hobart that we are not we know your needs. Your needs is cheap parking because of the lack of public transport in Hobart. I think we've got to send a real clear... If this motion fails tonight, it's sending the message, no, we're living in our little green, beautiful, idealistic millionaire's road, that we have a lovely life, we couldn't care less about the workers in the city. So, I know I've overdone that a bit, but I've overcooked it a bit, but that's what we've got to do. We've got to send the message, we know your problems. Now, this morning, I was stuck at the Mornington roundabout with the workers that were coming into the city for 20 minutes. There were cars going everywhere, from Sorrel, from South Armway, from Lauderdale, from 7 Mile Beach, all that. And that's happening in Kingston, and it's happening in northern suburbs. So we've got to accept there is a parking issue in Hobart, and we should address it.
Can I just... Lord Mayor, I'd be happy to include that suggestion from Alderman Briscoe.
So what was that, sorry?
I think it was that item number 3 ends with as a matter of urgency.
Yeah, number 3 is the part 3 is as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
Seconder.
The seconder's happy with that? Oh, the seconder is Councillor Sherlock. Did you want to accept in as a matter of urgency after 3? Yes? Oh, you can just say.
Yeah, look, I honestly don't really see it as a matter of urgency, so I don't think I'll be including that. And the reason why I say that is because in August 2019, we already agreed as a council that we were already investigating these things. We're just reiterating that again. So we're just doing double urgency, and I really...
No worries. Okay. That's your choice as the seconder, but
well,
Alderman
I moved as an amendment.
Councillor Coates.
I moved
An
as an amendment. It
yep.
wasn't included in.
Okay, Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll speak quickly to this. I guess I'll just outline, ultimately why I support this motion and put my name to it. And I thank the other aldermen for joining me on this. But, I mean, ultimately, we act as a governance body, and I've never been so happy as to read the General Manager's comments on this. I think the management of this city, this council, actually do get it that there is a problem with congestion, there is a problem with transport. And look, the good news is we've got arrows in the quiver. We don't necessarily have a silver bullet, but we do have options. And this isn't, directing it, they must do this or they must do that. It's at a very high level, noting the importance of public transport. It's noting the city deals and the stuff that's already underway and the hard work that the directors and the general manager and all the staff are putting in. But I guess, this is us as a community representation board. Ultimately, having this in front of them, they're all here listening, and I thank them for it, and hopefully they're listening to the concerns that people have raised and the reasons. But, we know that these things, in and of themselves, may not solve all the world's problems, but each one of these are a step in the right direction. As I said before, there's not going to be a silver bullet, but, at a very high level, why would we want early bird parking? It's not necessarily because we want to select a few chosen to get a lower rate. It's because we actually know that there's value in people utilising the transport infrastructure outside of that peak hour of demand. If we can encourage people to come in earlier, we don't need to build, the extra highway or employ an extra 100 buses. Will that individually solve it? Not necessarily, but it'll help. Why would we support public transport options? We all know that public transport won't work for everyone. There'll be those who have disability needs who need to drive or who need a special vehicle. But we do know that if we can get some people to use it and if we can make it affordable and reliable and work, then overall the city will flow better. Why would we want to have park and ride? Well, because we know that if we can try and keep some vehicles out of the very centre CBD, again, that'll ameliorate the congestion. And we actually want to encourage people to, to get a ride into work or to park on the outskirts and walk in. So, look, I see this at a very high level as us ultimately doing our job. And, we all represent the community, we walk the streets, we talk to people, we are at the Mornington roundabout trying to come in with all the other workers. And we know this is a huge frustration point. And so, look, I think this motion is timely, I think it's targeted, I think it's good. And I think when you read the manager's report, they get it as well, which is great. I'm sitting there going, tick, 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 this is awesome. And look, individually, each of these necessarily solve the problems, no. But I think all of them are options that we can use as a city, ultimately, to hopefully get the congestion issues down. I mean, we're very strong in our zoning. Nowhere is it zoned that West Hobart is a car park, or North Hobart is a car park, or Sandy Bay is a car park, or Battery Point is a car park. You know, and I think the residents in the inner city have sort of had enough, and definitely the workers and the people that need to come in from outside of inner city Hobart have definitely had enough. We all know it's an issue, but we all know that there's not going to be one simple solution. So look, I think moving a motion like this, which ultimately, you know, hopefully all the community out there, but also the managers and staff and the organisation in this room, we can all sort of agree on this and then actually try and come up with some innovative ideas around it. So look, I commend the other movers of this motion, and I'd ask that everyone will support it. Thank you.
Point of clarification, Lord Mayor. You didn't call for a seconder for my amendment.
I know, I was getting to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Who'd like to second?
I'll second it, Lord Mayor. But also, Lord Mayor, I think the amendment's nor here nor there, and I personally think let's get that out of the way and have it put, because it's only about whether we're going to support a matter of urgency or not, and I think we can get that out of the way and get on to the debate of the motion, Lord. That's what I'm just a suggestion, Lord Mayor. The late Barry Fisher. We are the custodians of the city of Hobart. Hobart is the capital city of Tasmania. We are the capital of predominantly southern Tasmania as well. We have an obligation to the greater Hobart and those people that want to visit the capital city. We are not one of the other cities, and I'm not being detrimental to them, but we are the capital. And as the custodians of the capital city of Hobart, we have an obligation to ensure that those that want to come to our wonderful city can do so. I agree with the fact that there are those people who want to ride a bike. That's about 6 or 7%. There are those people who want to catch public transport, which is only a certain percentage. I travel, as I've said many times, I travel the world, I travel Melbourne on a regular basis. And I travel in Melbourne on public transport, because the public transport system is very, very good. We haven't got a very good public transport system, and we need to, at least as the capital city, be open to those people who want to visit the city. So if we decide to say that you know, we're not open to the Greater Hobart or those that visit this capital city, you know, what's the point of us being the custodians of a capital city? We might as well turn around and say, let's make Launceston the capital city of Tasmania, because I've got to say to you, when you look at what they do up there, they seem to be opening their arms to a lot. I urge each and every elected member, irrespective of whether they like car parking, whether they like cars or whether they don't, each elected member around this table does drive a car, does use a car. You know, if we were total purists, my philosophy has always been is, if I'm going to be a purist, I'll be a purist at all times. And if I'm going to ride a bike, I'll ride a bike at all times. I don't care. I think for us to say to people, hey, we want you to ride bikes, we want you to have public transport, but yet we all as elected members have a car space here in the council floor, and I have seen every elected member park their car there. So please, I don't need to be told that I should ride a bike or catch public transport when we as elected members are not being purists. Now, if someone's going to preach to me and say to me that I need to catch public transport or I need to ride a bike, but yet, or if I preach that and then I drive around all the time, I'd consider myself, and I'm talking about myself, a hypocrite. I understand we're looking at the future, but the future is not here yet, and we don't have the public transport services that a capital city should have. And I've been advocating park and ride for absolutely years, and we've done nothing about it. Now, let's be real, be realistic, and not just think about our own idealistic aspects of what we would like to see our city be, but understand that we as custodians of the city got to acknowledge there are those people that cannot ride a bike. There are those people that cannot catch public transport, and ultimately, if we haven't realised we are an ageing population here in Tasmania, in particular Hobart.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, question through you, Lord Mayor, to Mr Carr. Mr Carr, could you you're at the Local Government Association Professional Development Day talking about parking and, well, particularly smart cities. Could you just tell, I think you described then how many people in North Hobart drive to North Hobart?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the data we're working with shows us about 20% of trips that finish in North Hobart start in North Hobart. So that's one of the data points we're working with.
Right, thank you. And just in relation to part 4 of this motion, it says considers the implementation of early bird parking in central Hobart and other council-owned car parks. We ceased early bird parking at the beginning of this year. What is the likely benefit of ceasing that over a 12-month period? What's the projected revenue relating to that?
Through you, Lord Mayor, through the numbers, should the numbers stay the same, then we would expect that to be around $500,000, which we are otherwise providing as a free service through the early bird service.
Yep, thank you. And just one more question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this. So, for those 70% of people who use their cars, I don't know if they use their cars all the time. How much of the time would they be using those cars in the city? Have you any idea?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'd have to take that one on notice.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Lord Mayor, I've asked some questions. Thank Mr Carr for some of those answers. Look, I'm concerned about this motion and some of the inferences that have been made around the table in relation to being purist or having particular specific positions on whether somebody is pro-car, pro-bikes, or making everybody ride bicycles or not drive. There is nothing in our transport strategy which is suggesting that people should be abandoning cars. What our transport strategy does is look at making the best options available, and that includes better public transport, and I acknowledge that Alderman Barakis has suggested that there is a better work to be done in that area. We have looked at, we are looking at park and ride, and I believe that there is a report likely to come back to us in relation to park and ride and other options. So later in the year, General Manager, is that right? So we have various policies and things in place already. So I find this quite a curious motion, and having such support from around the table, because I think a lot of it says very little, to be honest. Lord Mayor, one of the key things for me in relation to what we do with our city, and we have been working since the GIRL plan, the ICAP, rolling out ICAP solutions, better public pedestrian areas in our city. We've had some plans for wider footpaths. We're starting in Midtown. Just recently we have bike lanes which are going in, and doing all of those things which help with public health and well-being, and that is critical for me as an elected representative to ensure that we have good options safe streets, and fewer car emissions. Car emissions are, maybe Alderman Sexton might be able to talk to this, car emissions are really having an impact on cardiorespiratory health, and even in a relatively clean and green area such as Hobart, if we can reduce the amount of cars coming into the city, we have those added benefits. So there's climate change things, there's greenhouse gas emissions, there's all these things that we should be considering, but what we are doing is good public policy, and I find this a really curious motion to consider tonight, because as far as I can see, there are a lot of these things that are in train. So I'm not sure the purpose of the motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. The first part of the motion is note the work being undertaken with the Hobart City deal to improve public transport, which is a good thing to do. It's good to acknowledge the ongoing work that's happening, but I'd also like to acknowledge the good work that City Innovation does with regard to monitoring traffic, with regard to gathering data, with regard to looking for innovative ways to try and manage traffic within the city. That's an important component of how we manage traffic going forward in Hobart. Part 3, I would also like to move an amendment. So rather than investigate locations, which we're already doing, the General Manager has told us that in his blurb below the notice of motion, in his comments with regard to the notice of motion. So I'd like to move an amendment that we note the existing council decision to investigate locations within our municipality. So the amendment is...
Foreshadowed amendment.
There's an active amendment.
Foreshadowed amendment.
Yep, okay. That we note the existing council decision to investigate locations within a municipality which could be utilised as full or day park. And that acknowledges that we're already doing the work. So there's no need to state the obvious. We're already doing it. And with regard to part 4, we've only just gotten rid of early bird parking, which has been a success already, and it has reduced traffic slightly in the morning, and it has pushed that across to later in the day. And I'll just confirm that with Mr. Carr. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, yes, that is correct.
So there has been advantages already with getting rid of the early bird. So under no circumstances would I support going back to the early bird when we haven't even got, more than 6 weeks worth of data. So what I would suggest with part 4 is that we request a report in 6 to 12 months to outline the financial and parking access impacts from the removal of the early bird parking. So that means we quantify the impact of removing early bird parking at an appropriate time once there's more data to analyse. So that would be the other foreshadowed motion. But also it's very challenging to support motions that are just paraphrasing what we're already doing. And I think that comes down to not having done your homework when it comes to writing a motion. And I know that the
order, Lord Mayor. The implication of this motion, that this motion's only arisen because somebody's failed to do their homework, is obviously an intention of having a crack at myself, and I think that's inappropriate.
I think it's an opinion. I think it's just part of debate.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope the same rules are applied to everybody.
So, Lord Mayor, if the proponents of this motion, the movers of the motion, have spoken to the General Manager, they could have been informed about what's already in train, and that means they could have nuanced the motion to maybe look at something slightly different than what we're already doing. So the two amendments, two foreshadowed amendments that I'm moving.
If the Alderman had actually done his homework and spoken to the General Manager, he would have found out. I spoke to the General Manager last week about this motion.
Okay, thank you.
I've spoken to the General Manager too,
okay.
so I think
excuse
as
me,
a point of order, you've got to ask Councillor, I know he's on your side, you've got to ask him to withdraw those motions. That is, you're letting people get away with things like that. It is a point of order. It is a point of... Well, good on you. And I disagree with your point of order, but I'll sit down. But he made a comment about my integrity, that I haven't done my homework. That is incorrect. You should ask him to withdraw. You may not think...
Excuse me, Alderman
I'll
Briscoe.
sit down, but I...
Do you know the meeting procedures which suggests that I will make a ruling on a point of order, not you?
No,
and then,
I
yes,
can
that
disagree
is...
with your point of order.
The ruling of the chair is final on a point of order.
Oh, well, it might be final, but it doesn't mean I agree with it.
Fine.
It does appear that they might have, that the proponents of this motion had done their homework. However, that wasn't reflected as I see the motion. So anyway, we'll move on. But just to pick up a couple of other points about representing people in Hobart, and I feel that we are and should be representing the people of Hobart, and that means relieving the pressure in the suburbs from having commuters occupy the streets all day. And we're attempting to do that by having sensors in certain locations, by having line markings in certain locations. That's helping to relieve some of the stress that is occurring in the suburbs of Hobart. So again, I commend the City Innovation Division for looking at those innovations. When it comes to being idealistic or preaching, I don't think Council does that. What I think Council is doing is looking at the options for providing alternatives to driving your car. Now, there's a bit of low-hanging fruit we've just discovered tonight, which is the 20% of people who begin and end their journeys in North Hobart. If we could encourage those people to take other means, walking, cycling, then that would free up a lot more road space to allow people who need to drive to be able to drive. So there's a whole lot of things we can be doing to improve the situation without going straight to building or considering building more car parks, which we're already investigating in the municipality. So I hope I get support for the two foreshadowed amendments. Otherwise, I'll find it very difficult to be able to support the amendment as it is. And I'll just note that we do need 7 to achieve that last part 4 of the recommendation, of the motion.
Okay, just a moment with this. Alderman Barakis, did you want to accept in though any of those amendments?
No, Lord Mayor.
So that was the even the 4.
Can the 4 be read out again?
So I think you've suggested that item 4 can't be passed in its current form anyway, and I think Alderman... Councillor Harvey was suggesting a separate...
I only suggested that item 4 be voted on separately.
I'd be voted on separately.
just so there's the different thresholds between what we need to pass.
But okay, so you'd still like to proceed with the removal of something that we've...
Correct.
Yeah.
A question, Lord Mayor, through to the General Manager.
I think the General Manager would like to speak first.
It might be the same thing. Can I just mention it? So the word consider doesn't make a decision, so it doesn't need 7, does it? No. Thank you.
The way the legislation is worded, Lord Mayor, if it negates or conflicts with a previous council decision, then it does need an absolute majority. And it also requires under the legislation that you must have a certificate or a qualified advice from me because that decision has been enacted. So if you stick with the word considers, it's fine. If it's overturn or negate or whatever, there's more work to be done.
Okay. All right, but we'll take that separately as requested by Alderman Barakis. But I think we've got a couple of motions before us now. So before we proceed further with debate, I will put... would anyone like to speak on Alderman Briscoe's amendment?
Can we hear it again, please?
Just adding as a matter of urgency to 3.
Can I just very, very briefly, Lord Mayor, on Alderman Briscoe's amendment and just taking some of the points that were raised in regards to the amendment. I'll note that part 3 of the General Manager's report said at the meeting on the 13th of August 2019. I think that would be off the top of my head at least 18 months ago. I think if we haven't gotten any progress on that, I think given what's happening and the calls from the community at the moment regarding the issue, I think we could, and the motion itself does indicate that this be taken as a matter of higher urgency than it's currently be taking. So I don't think it's redundant. I think it actually addresses the timeline of what's going on and just calls for it to happen sooner rather than what's already happening.
So did you want to add in the fact that you're noting the council's existing decision? Okay.
I think I'll accept the, or I'd be
The
supporting the
urgent-
motion as
yeah.
suggested by Alderman Briscoe.
Okay. So as a matter of urgency, so anyone else want to speak on that? No? So that was moved by Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Alderman Alderman Zuko. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
The amendment's carried, Lord Mayor, 6 votes to 5.
Okay, so now we have the foreshadowed amendment, which is firstly to add to item 3, which we've just voted on, something at the beginning of the sentence, which would be note the existing council decision, and then to investigate blah blah blah. Is that correct? And the second part of the motion of the foreshadowed motion is to foreshadowed amendment is to add the words request a report, was it, in 6 months?
Request a report in 6 to 12 months to outline the financial and parking access impacts from the removal of early bird.
Okay. I need a seconder for that. Councillor Sherlock. Oh, I think Councillor Sherlock can't. Anyone else willing to second that? Councillor Dutta, okay. All right, so is everyone clear on that one?
So
Yeah.
is that a 5 then, or is that being added to 4?
That's 4.
Replacing the 4?
Yeah.
No, it's changing the 4, I think, isn't it?
Request a report rather than take it away.
I mean the same thing as number 4.
Okay.
Can take it away.
Well, it's better than remove early bird parking.
No, implementation. Considers.
It's not, the report will consider.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask Ms Johns to read the 4 amendment.
The amendment, Lord Mayor, is that a report be provided within 6 to 12 months to outline the financial and parking impacts of the removal of the early bird parking.
Okay, so it is instead of the other one. Okay, so I'll put both those together. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Start
Lord
again,
Mayor?
'cause I think Councillor Harvey's in favour.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas and Alderman Briscoe.
It's lost, Lord Mayor, 5 votes to 6.
So now we have another. Now,
That's it.
would anyone like to speak on the substantive motion, or as amended?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Look, I think I've been on this council for probably over 2 years now, and I think I do recall time and time again being told that certain things that come to council shouldn't really waste our time. And the reason why, I think, has been pointed out by Alderman Baracus already, with reference to the points I made on Facebook today, why I consider this a waste of time, is because, as has already been noted, from points 1, 2 and 3, we're already doing this as a council. We're already doing the things that have been outlined at points 1, 2 and 3. And I think it's somewhat disingenuous to say we should be noting these things. The reason why I say that is because we have already done so. We have noted these things. We have outlined them already at point 1 of the point 1 and 2 that Alderman Baracus mentioned. And specifically with regards to point 3, I know Alderman Baracus said in August 2019 we talked about this, but again, we've resolved inter alia to investigate suitable sites for park and ride on the fringe of the city. A range of city fringe locations are being considered, as are a range of other strategic stakeholder factors, including the ongoing redevelopment of Macquarie Point, the operating model of the city's largest private car park operators, potential asset sales to fund new capital works, major decisions relating to park and ride and public transport arising from the city deal, and other mitigating factors. So again, point 3, we're already doing it. And now when we talk about point 4, that again is rather curious to me as well, which is what the Deputy Lord Mayor pointed out. I see points 1, 2 and 3 as almost a series of unfortunate points. And to culminate the last bit of point 4, again, we all voted on this unanimously. Those around the table here, we voted to cease the early bird parking. The only two people who didn't vote to cease the early bird parking was Alderman Sexton and Councillor Dutta, because they were not present. But all of us here, and Councillor Coates, because he wasn't here, and perhaps Councillor Coates actually is probably within his, the only legitimate one here to say, well, I don't agree with it. But we're going back on what we already said. We're going back on what we already agreed to do, which was to cease the early bird parking. So when people say, look, this motion is just outlining us doing our job, yeah, we've already outlined that. It's a waste of time. We've been doing our job. The council officers have been doing their job. The council staff has been doing their job. When people say, oh, yeah, look, we look at what the general manager says, and oh, look, I'm sitting here going tick, tick, tick to all the boxes. Yeah, the boxes have already been ticked because the council officers, the council staff, they have already been doing this. So it begs the question, why do we have this motion here today? It really does. I mean, any intelligent person would probably be sitting there going, look, my intelligence is sitting over there just sort of a little bit amazed at the moment. For anybody here around this chamber and probably outside of this chamber as well. So to me, there's not two Tasmanians. There's not the people in Hobart and then the people in Greater Hobart. This idea of we're living in this idealistic life, comments and things like that, I see it as so completely irrelevant to what this motion is actually putting forward. So let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to what this motion is actually asking. Let's bring it back and talk about the things that this motion is trying to actually do, which is 1, 2 and 3, acknowledge what the council officers have already been doing. Acknowledge what the council has already agreed to do. That's the purpose of this motion. Let's not be mistaken by that, and let's not throw in all sorts of hyperbolic comments and hyperbole within this debate to distract from what this motion is actually about. I mean, it's just shocking. I'm shocked and stunned and somewhat amazed that we have to sit here and just waste time about something like this.
Well said.
And so, when we're talking about considering the implementation, which is point 4 of... Sorry, can I just seek an extra 1 minute?
I'm happy to move the motion to extended time.
Moved by Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think we've been sitting here for 45 minutes talking about it, and I've had 5 minutes now. I think I am entitled to my time to speak, and subsequently I will take it. So, like I said, I'm shocked and stunned and amazed as why we would retract on our position at point 4 and go back on what we've already decided.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Point of order. There was an extension of time given, but all I'm hearing on the extension of time is a repeat of what has been said.
That's not a point of order, Alderman
Well,
Zuko.
Lord Mayor, we're going to extend the time, seriously, as a chairperson... God.
Under the Act...
Okay, fair enough, Lord Mayor.
I'm just going to read out, excuse me, Councillor
Be preached to again, because we've been preached to for the last 5 minutes,
Excuse me.
and a good chairperson would say that's not new information.
Alderman Zuko, if you wouldn't mind, I am, as the chair, going to just remind people
I'll
of the
remind
points
us
of order
all.
under
Yes.
Regulation 23.
Yes, preach to us, thank you.
Excuse me, Alderman Zuko, could you please listen respectfully?
I'm not a child at a school. I don't need to be lectured by you, Lord Mayor.
The member can only raise a point of order in one of 5 instances.
Oh.
Councillor speaking is raising an issue that's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. It's already been said 3 times in a debate.
I don't agree with your ruling.
Right, that's right. Well, you don't agree with my ruling. There you go, it's a point of order.
Councillor speaking is being interrupted or distracted. A councillor is of the opinion that a meeting procedure is contrary to the Act or regulations. The council has been misrepresented during the debate, or the statement that is being made by the councillor is likely to be offensive to a councillor or another individual from the perspective of the reasonable person. The chair must deal with the point of order when it's raised, and any speaker must cease speaking. The chair's ruling on a point of order is final and binding on the meeting. Okay, Councillor Sherlock, if you'd like to finish with your 1 minute now, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And just a final... sorry, before I do make my final point, I would just like to acknowledge the comment that I was preaching. Most certainly I was not. Like everybody around this table, I'm giving my 2 cents worth and giving my opinion and giving my input into this debate. And I don't think it should be belittled to and be phrased as something that's preaching. These are facts. When somebody wants to term something as something such as facts as preaching, really that's a big problem. Like either that's touched a nerve, or I don't know why you would even want to say that. It makes me question why somebody would say that. And now I'll move on to the last point, which is point number 4. When we talk about the 250 people, this, to my understanding, is the early bird. It was 250 people or so, around that number, who are getting this exclusive number of people who are getting this subsidy. That's a small number of people that are getting a subsidy for early bird parking, and I think we should be mindful of that. We should also understand that that's what we're talking about here today. We're not talking about everybody being a purist, somebody stopping people from getting into a car, going along the lines of we're barracking for only buses and walkers and scooters and
That's
skateboarders.
time, Councillor Sherlock.
Question, if I may, Lord Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Through you to Mr Carr, could you explain how long or why it's taken so long to get to the information on Park and Ride? Because I know this has come up a number of times in relation to that.
Mr Carr?
Through you, Lord Mayor. The last couple of months of 2019, we turned to thinking about how to solve the problem, and then 2020, this isn't an excuse, but COVID took up all of 2020, and a key part of the approach for us to establish where a park and ride can exist within the city is based on us assessing the origin destination data on a per car park basis of where people come from before they arrive at Argyle, or where they come from before they arrive at Centrepoint or Hobart Central. And so what COVID did was totally change all the traffic patterns for Hobart. So I can't come back to you with any quantitative basis to put a report together based on the traffic from last year. It's just impossible. Now that we have to, so it's not just about finding the 2 spots of vacant land or repurposable land that we have on this side of the bridge or at Newtown or somewhere like that, because we need to overlay the people part of that. And then Macquarie Point's doing stuff, we know Clarence is thinking about doing stuff, and then we have this other problem of, well, we only operate less than half of the parking in the city, and the other parking operators largely operate lease long-term car parking. So none of this is enhancing the short-term car park stuff. So it's all important to considerations, and we just haven't had the data.
Okay.
And just a subsequent question whilst Mr Carr is there. So the work that the state government is doing on the municipal park and ride in Kingborough Council, you're working together with the state government in relation to coming up with those answers?
Well, through you, Chair, that as a key project of the city deal is locked in, and based on all the sort of data that I've just spoken about, that we don't have for other parts of the city. But it does also influence the fact that there would be little point in us putting a park and ride somewhere in Dunedin or something on the other side of the hill, where there's going to be a 5th lane and a park and ride on the other side. of the mountain. There's only three ways into Hobart. One's over the bridge, one's down the Brooker, and one's down the southern outlet. The southern outlet's off. The bridge, we have Clarence and Macquarie Point to consider. And in terms of the Brooker, the quarry is there, there's other things up there, but we still need the data, and we haven't had 12 months of normal data to bring a quantitative, qualified recommendation to council. We know people come from Sorrel, we know people come from the north, we know people come from the south, but it's not enough for me to stand and give you a qualified recommendation about where to put these things until we get that data.
Sorry, while you're on your feet, Mr. Carr, can I just ask you a couple of questions around the early bird, because I know we're voting on that item separately. Can you just outline how long the decision that we made in 2019 has been in place? Like, how long has it been operationalised for?
So, as per the original decision, we started communicating with the public in around October last year that we would be removing early birds as of the 1st of January. So that was the decision after Christmas. It's been in place since the 1st of January, and I would say that's a part of why the numbers are low, because people are still returning to work. Again, I would say, just from a quantitative perspective, we would ideally like at least 6 months to prove or disprove the policy that has already been endorsed by council, because the numbers, turning over those car parks to the general population, part of the intent, not just the money, part of the intent was to inject up to 2,000 car parks into the Hobart CBD by increasing that turnover.
So is it, how many person hours do you reckon have gone into implementing the decision that we made in 2019?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I couldn't estimate, but it would be hundreds and many staff. All policies, when implemented correctly, and certainly something as emotive as parking and emotive for the community, we take very seriously. So there's a massive effort to now to pivot.
And have you got any idea about, what would the cost be if we decided to sort of reverse that decision? What would the cost be to the council budget?
I might have to take that one on notice, Lord Mayor. To this point,
would there be a cost, or would it be cost?
Look, I think at this stage, again, with the occupancy data, we could say it's up or down. I think it's negligible. I think we're getting to a point where the city's, back from Christmas and we're getting into the swing of it. So I would just, I would ask council to give us more time to give them a qualified answer. Okay, and just based on what you have seen in the first few weeks of it operating, is it actually providing more turnover of car parking spots for shops and services in the city? Lord Mayor, there's certainly been a slight uptick in overall numbers over the course of the day. They are down at the start of the day when the early birds would initially come in, but again, I'm not prepared to sit here and tell you that's as a result of the policy, because all of January, Hobart's away. That's a euphemism, but it's fairly true. I mean, Hobart shuts down, so we won't see real data until we're sort of February, March, April, and again, I wouldn't like to give you a qualified recommendation until we see that information.
Yep. All right, further discussion on the motion. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It is interesting to look at this particular motion and the 4 points that's been made here. For me, the issue is about parking. Now, this chamber has acknowledged it. In the last 3, 4, 5 years ago, we have acknowledged that there is a problem. None of us here in this chamber would deny that. And I accept that. It's a matter of perception, it's a matter of reality, it's a matter of fact that there is a problem with regards to parking. And it's caused by a number of different factors. I mean, I could say it's people who are coming here in their thousands because they want 20 points extra for their visas. And there are other things. I could go on because there are so many other factors that we can take into point. But the issue of parking is a problem. Point number 2 is this. The question is whether this council, this chamber, has addressed dealing with the problem. And my answer to this is very simple. The 2 points quite clearly acknowledges it, it has noted it, and then it has implemented it. So the council acknowledged it, they noted it, and they've implemented it. And it is so clearly stated in the general manager's report. Number 3 is the same thing. Whether we have acted on this. Yes, we have. It's already set in motion. It takes time, we have heard. Last year, things went haywire, and therefore we need to take that into account. And point number 4 for me, I'm addressing the points here and in the motion. Point number 4 looks at a decision that was made only a little while ago. Now, if it was a unanimous decision made, it was made on the basis of the staff evidence. They did their homework, and then they came with the report to say, this is it. That's the way decisions are made, I understand, in this chamber. It's not based on one's emotions. It's based on the work that is done by staff, they presented, and everybody agreed to it. Now, if we were to now change this only in the last 6 weeks, it's not a very good look. The governance issue is a big issue for me. We have made the decision in 6 weeks' time, we want to change this. So I will not be in a position to support that. I could go on, but those are my simple points to this simple motion. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? No further discussion? Okay, I'll say a few points. On the motion, yeah, I mean, I think I would like to acknowledge Councillor Sherlock's and Councillor Dutta's contributions in particular about the importance of evidence-based policy making. And it is really relevant to the reputation of this council that we make a decision based on the evidence presented by professional staff about the way to manage our assets to the best effect of running the city, the best effect of running our own financial situation. We make the decision, we ask them to implement it, they spend hundreds of person hours implementing it, and then based not on any evidence or anything other than just a couple of newspaper articles or some good media, we're deciding that we might reverse that decision, not based on any evidence provided or information provided by our staff. I think that's poor policy making, so I'm glad item 4 is being separated because I will very much be voting against that. I would certainly like to be kept up to date with how the early bird parking policy is going. I'd like to know what implications it's having for our finances, which we all have to be aware of. And I'm also very interested to know whether it is doing what it was meant to do, which was to provide a niche that doesn't exist in the city, which is short-term parking to assist our traders, our shoppers, our patients, our services. Nobody else in the private sector is providing that service, and we do through our car parks, and we should. So I'm glad that one's being done separately. As far as the other 3 points, look, you know, I think they are, there is a bit of positioning here. You know, we all agree that we need to improve public transport. We all have already noted that we're going to investigate park and ride facilities, but it's not simple. You know, to build a new park and ride facility in a quarry would be millions of dollars that we don't have. And we need to decide whether that's the most effective policy for dealing with the transport issues. It may be, it may not be, but it's really important that we don't just sort of cherry pick a few solutions that we like the sound of, but we actually do consider this really sensibly. But look, we have already decided to do that. It's really just redeciding it. You know, that is fine. I'm happy to support that, but I will vote against the removal of early bird parking, just on the fact that, on reinstating early bird parking on the basis that, like Councillor Data said, the good governance, the reputation of this council as an evidence-based oversight body that takes seriously the advice, the professional advice provided to it, that takes seriously the financial implications of its decisions. I will vote against that. I just wanted to also just very briefly touch on some of the other general commentary that's been provided around this this motion, which I expect we will see, you know, presented with lots of flurry on social media later. But as part of, I had the privilege of signing an opinion piece that was signed by the 4 Greater Hobart mayors and the Transport Minister last week in response to people just sort of making generalised statements about how simple it is to solve Hobart's transport issues. And I'll just quote from this. "We know Hobart is growing, and it's predicted that by 2030 there will be an extra 7,500 journeys into the CBD each day, the majority of which will originate in neighbouring local government areas. Let's imagine for a moment that all 7,500 additional trips are taken by car. The resulting congestion would extend across the Greater Hobart network. To put it in perspective, to meet the additional parking demand would require 4 new Argyle Street car parks to be built and 3,000 extra suburban car spaces. By no means a practical solution." Now, this idea that somehow parking is simple and public transport is hard is just not a correct idea, because the state government could, with a stroke of a pen tomorrow, make public transport free, and that would have a budget implication, but it's not out of the ballpark. And they could also add 20 extra bus services on the key routes, double-decker bus services for a few $1 million, and then we would have a substantially improved public transport system compared to 4 extra Argyle Street car parks and 3,000 more spaces in our suburbs. I mean, who's being realistic here? So I just think we do have to provide people choice. This is about choice. But we also have to be realistic and not provide false promises that you can do whatever you like and we can just provide a car park for every single person who wants to come into the city. We have to say we can't. We will provide some, but we are ultimately about providing choice and making the city work well. Thank you. Okay, Alderman Barakis, did you want to sum up?
Lord Mayor, I've got a lot that I could say, but in the interest of time, I don't think it's needed.
Okay, so we'll move the items 1 to 3 of your motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, items 1 to 3, parts 1 to 3 of item 11 have been carried, 8 votes to 3.
And now we'll vote on item 4. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against?
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, part 4 is lost, 5 votes to 6.
Okay. Moving on now to Finance and Governance Committee. Item 12.
Oh, sorry. Financial report, Lord Mayor. I move the item. The council approve the changes to the budget.
Seconded.
Which will just increase the budget deficit by a small margin. So move, Lord Mayor.
Any discussion on this very significant financial report?
I don't want to hold up things, although we do have the AGM to wait for anyway. The reality in committee I thought was really significant, and Alderman Sexton made a number of points, and I think it is important to be risk conscious and to paint the picture as it is, but as Alderman Sexton said and demonstrated very adequately, Lord Mayor, the year-to-date loss doesn't give this figure a lot of credence. The year-to-date loss is a lot less than a $12 million end-of-year situation. And I appreciate that we need to prepare our constituency for the worst, but I think in the very small number of illustrations that he made forcibly at the council meeting, we are way off being in this worst situation that is presently put. And if we actually paint a picture like this, people tend to paint their own lives accordingly. So they look and say, okay, we're going to get a huge council impost in terms of rates or other charges. Charges are going to go up, and they act accordingly. It's very much like the the business survey, the business expectations. If you paint a bad picture, people will make decisions or omit to take decisions based on that. So whilst we can leave it on the record because it has been produced by the experts within the council, and I'm sorry he's just left, he's probably still driving out as the words are ringing in his ear, but he did make valid points, and I think the likelihood of we're going to crash and burn at 12 million is most unlikely. But you'll be able to look back at this General Manager and say, well, I bought it in much less than that, didn't I, when you're no longer here.
Comment.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I think this adjustment is obviously, I don't think it can be downplayed. I think we do have to go into this as responsible financial managers, and I know that this is a shifting of various parts of the costs or benefits coming into the council. And it's very good to have all of this here, but we are in a significantly worse situation than any council would really want to be. So I think we've got to bear that in mind. And part 2 says that the council will conduct a workshop in late February, early March to consider the long-term financial options for the City of Hobart. We had significant things to consider, including rates, including costs or cost recovery. So a lot of that will have to, and what we can provide to the city. So we will be I'll certainly be taking my pencil along to that, sharpened to look through and to be financially responsible in these straitened times.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 13, Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I put the item. It's Ronald McDonald charity. It's about parking spaces they utilise in the car park. The committee acknowledged the important factors that what Ronald McDonald do, and are providing some changes to what we have done in the past, and also move.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Lord Mayor, just a question, because I need further clarification on this. So, in essence, we're not just exclusively providing these car parks for Ronald McDonald House, is that right?
That's correct.
And will other charities or those people who have patient-assisted travel scheme will be able to access those? Is that right?
That is correct, Lord Mayor.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I mean, I was always concerned, whilst the intentions, I'm sure, of Alderman Barakis were noble in helping a particular charity, and particularly for parents who are coming intrastate down to Hobart with their sick children. There's certainly many other charities who require and people who need patient-assisted travel schemes who require that. So I'm really pleased that that's extended, and I think it's a much better approach to approve this in not exclusively for one particular charity.
Okay, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And look, I'll note what the Deputy Lord Mayor said. I think this was something that was in response to a need at the time from Ronald McDonald House, and I do think that I think the concerns that the Deputy Lord Mayor raised were well founded. I think, especially now having spoken to some of the board members from Ronald McDonald House, they were disappointed about the recommendation, but I think they understood that it's better to have something that's sustainable rather than have that good little free thing, which was that was a fantastic subsidy for them. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the important work that they do and the service they provide. But as well, I'll echo what the Deputy Lord Mayor said and say that this is something, it's a service. If we're able to provide it on a sustainable basis, have a policy that applies to all organisations that fit in that category, I think it's just a better outcome. It's an outcome that will survive us into the long term, and it won't just be something for one organisation for a limited period of time. So look, whilst there are some people that will be disappointed, I think in the long run this is right. I think it's correct, and I think it will mean good outcomes for those organisations such as Ronald McDonald House and others that provide really important services for the community, especially to people that are going through some very vulnerable parts of their life. So I'd commend this, and just once again acknowledge the hard work that Ronald McDonald House does.
So I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 14.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, this is a policy on lobbyists and developers. I'd like to reserve my right to speak, but I'll just put the motion and then reserve my right to speak. The committee discussed this heavily, and it's decided that we write to the Minister for Local Government in regards to developing a statewide approach for the registration of local government lobbyists and developers for elected members during the consultation process of the draft government bill. So move.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas. Any further discussion? Alderman Barakis.
Just a question, Lord Mayor, to the General Manager. I think during debate on this item last week in committee, there was an amendment that was moved to remove the word contact from the part 1 of the motion. That did pass. Just want to clarify that because it seems to be in there again.
General Manager.
I think there was some discussion about what the original motion was.
It was.
Yeah, and then the word contact was to be removed. It was just the registration of lobbyists and developers, not contact.
I think that's correct.
That is correct, yes, it was. Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Lord Mayor, that is correct. The word contact was removed.
To be treated as a typographical error.
Yeah.
The motion, as we're debating, read out.
So that's now been removed. That was an error.
The typical, yeah, that was.
It's an error from the General Manager, Lord Mayor.
Okay, further
Can
discussion.
we get at what the actual motion is going to be?
I'll just take $1 out of his wages.
Sorry? Just taking the word contact out of item number 1.
As I move the motion, Lord Mayor, the word contact of item number 1 is removed because it was a typographical error as per what the General Manager has pointed out.
Further discussion. Alderman Harvey. Councillor Harvey, sorry.
Lord Mayor, can I just get a clarification here about the difference between with or without contact? Because registering lobbyists, that's one thing, but also keeping a record of their interactions means that you would need to have some sort of arrangement as well. Was that discussed at the committee meeting? So the council endorsed a holistic statewide approach to the registration of lobbyists and developer contact with Tasmania elected representatives. So there's two issues. There's having the list of developers, of lobbyists like the state government does, so that's fine. And the original motion was to have something similar to state government. The second part is, do you need to record your interactions with lobbyists? So if you go out for coffee and dinner and lunch or whatever with proponents, should you record those contacts?
Can I provide some point of clarification on that, Lord
Yes,
Mayor?
Alderman Barakis.
Lord Mayor, on page 19 of the, which I've just lost, page 19 of the report from the Finance and Governance meeting last week, which I'll just get back up again, apologies, did actually say what the motion was that passed council on the 24th of August. I think there was some debate at the time about the difference between the lobbyist register and the register of contacts for people that were on those lists. And I'm pretty sure, from memory, it was actually amended and that second part was dropped. Part 1.1 of the report on page 19 of the Finance and Governance agenda said, the purpose of this report is to address the following resolution arising from the notice of motion submitted to the Council at its meeting of the 24th of August 2020. That a report be prepared on the development of a council policy in line with state government policy regarding the process for a registration of developers. It makes no mention of register of contact with elected representatives. And I think the motion needs to be reflective of what the resolution of council last year was, and that's what was discussed in council in committee last week, and that was accepted and it was amended. So I just want to make sure that what we're discussing is correct.
Lord Mayor, maybe I can assist, and I think Alderman Barakis is probably correct, Lord Mayor. What was decided is you didn't have to keep records and notes and records of discussions with lobbyists and developers. We simply just do what the state government does, which is establish a register of lobbyists or developers, and that's where it stops. As to whether or not you take notes, it is up to you as individuals as to whether you take notes or not, but the policy or the discussion wasn't requiring them to do so.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Clarify.
So, I've got the floor. Yep.
Sorry, Councillor Harper was on his feet first.
So anyway, all right, well, I don't mind that. The council write to the Minister for Local Government in regard to developing a statewide legislative approach for the registration of local government lobbyists and developers for elected members during the consultation process for the draft local government bill. Where are we at with that local government bill?
Lord Mayor, the latest that I heard, and it was that the draft exposure bill will probably be out this side of before the 30th of June.
Okay, so there's still plenty of time to write to them. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm happy for the Minister for Local Government. Report be provided to the Council on the outcomes at the appropriate time. So I'm happy with the motion as it stands, Lord Mayor. I don't see any need to try and amend anything, so I'll be supporting it.
Lord Mayor, I just want a point of clarification. And it's only clarification to assist those people that weren't at the committee meeting. It was in regards to the reasons behind writing to the Minister. A question was asked of the I think it was the General Manager, in regards to whether or not, even with a policy without legislative approach, it doesn't have any grunt. It needs to be legislated for our policy to have grunt.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 15, Tasmanian Boxing League.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Basically what we've done here is the General Manager has got the... I'll move the item.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
The General Manager's got to be authorised to negotiate a sponsorship arrangement with this organisation, and so be it.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Tasmanian Boxing League approached me and spoke to me at length about this, and there was some debate in committee and there was some discussion with the applicants about whether or not the event constituted or was deserving of the non-commercial rate, given that they were operating as a non-for-profit and they effectively existed as a sporting club to try and put on events. And I think it was rightfully deemed in the committee that was largely irrelevant if we charged the full rate and then was to negotiate a commercial deal in exchange for advertising. And I think, given that this is, and there will be a world female boxing championship being held on this event, it will be an event that has rather wide and high interest and will be highly viewed. I think there is definitely a benefit to the council in negotiating an advertising deal, because it would be beneficial to have, supported by the City of Hobart on an event that I think will garner a pretty high amount of attention. And look, I think it's something it's a win-win. I think it provides for the events. It helps get the events in Hobart moving again, and helps support a good and worthy sport. And I think it gets our name on those posters and on those TV streams and on the social media posts. So I think it's a win-win.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions, Lord Mayor. So firstly, there's a world title fight on the card that night, I understand. How much are tickets usually to an event like this? Do we have any indication of I mean, I'm not against sponsoring an event, but if they're making a fortune out of it, or they're breaking even or whatever, I'd like an understanding of the financial.
Look, Mayor, as I understand, the tickets for this event are selling online, and they're between $50 and $100 per ticket, as I understand it.
So that would imply that, is it a profit-making fight, or do they aim to break even, and is our money... now that it's a sponsorship deal, I think that it's a different arrangement and I will support it. I'm just curious to see whether or not they actually need this sponsorship arrangement, or whether it's just our goodwill via Councillor Barakis.
It's a not-for-profit club but a for-profit event. Is that correct?
I might be able to provide some clarification to Councillor Harvey's questions. I think there was a bit of dispute as to whether or not it would constitute or it'd be qualifying of the non-community rate, which is where we had a very in-depth conversation as to the nature of its non-for-profitness and the fact that they were charging. In discussions with the event holders, they did say because of the extra hoops they had to jump through because of COVID restrictions and whatnot, at $50, I think the $100 is only for the front seat tables, but the majority of the tickets would be $50, that they were expecting to be breaking even. But I think we're charging the full rate, and I think that kind of almost got around that issue where it's not really important whether or not they're operating as a community event or a commercial event. Any discount that we're offering after that the general manager would be negotiating would be whether or not it comes as a financial benefit of the council in the process of advertising. It'd be a commercial thing rather than whether or not we're sponsoring them or not. So I think that was what it ultimately came down to avoid the situation of are they making a profit, are they not making a profit? If they are making a profit, where's the money going? If we charge a full commercial rate and then anything else that's negotiated is whether or not there's a benefit back to council in doing so, it's a purely commercial decision. Which I think that was an item of pretty significant issue in committee.
I'm a bit more confused now, but anyway, thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Dutta.
Just a question then. With regards to the decision made that this is a commercial venture and you can't charge community rate, is this then somehow or the other we're trying to do something different to allow this to happen? You know, I mean, they themselves didn't ask us for sponsorship, but we are accommodating that. I mean, this is, again, for me, is questionable.
Lord Mayor, I take the point, but I don't think it's questionable because it's counterbalanced by Part 3 of the motion, because the value of any sponsorship, and it is an international event, will be discounted and shown in the annual report, so that the arrangement will be fully transparent and fully disclosed in our annual report as a benefit.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 16, Parks and Recreation Committee, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't think this is a great debate item. It's proposed to offer, I move the item that's on the books.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
It's proposed to offer the Hobart Football Club a new 5-year lease with an option for a further 5-year over the city-owned club rooms, change rooms and the kiosk at the TCA ground. The club has held a lease over the premises since 1944, and obviously the new lease is supported subject to the council's obligations under the Local Government Act, which are outlined there.
Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 17, special report about professional development of Deputy Lord Mayor. Would someone like to move that? Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Councillor Harvey. No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. We'll now move into the closed portion of the meeting. Moved from Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. So we're now moving into the closed and ask that the members of the public leave, and we'll be switching off.